Welcome back, everybody, to Activista Rise Up. I am Dr. Patricia Campos-Medina, your host. You can listen to this podcast on all my social media platforms. Activista Rise Up is about leaders and what moves them to take action. We hope to inspire you to join causes you care about or to learn from these leaders and their experiences to inspire you to take action and change the world with them. Today, you will meet Dr. Sharon Wright Austin, a scholar and author, and a pioneer leader in the study of the Black women's political experience, and has a long record of studying the African American political engagement in American politics. She is the author of several books, including Race, Power, and Political Emergence in Memphis, The Transformation of Plantation Politics in Mississippi, and the Mississippi Delta, and the Caribbeanization of Black politics. Dr. Austin is a scholar on voting rights and on minority politics, on American government, public policy, and public law. Dr. Sharon Wright Austin, welcome to Activista Rise Up. You and I are both members of the DISE collective, a group of political economists who are coming together as academics to support each other in our study of the social economy. So as a political scientist, why do I always been, why is the connection between a social economy, political science, government, and what's happening in this country right now? I want to show our listeners and that this is a book that we recently work on together. Dr. Sharon Austin is the editor of Beyond Racial Capitalism, who explores the connections of the African diaspora and migrants from the global South in the social economy. So that's how I met you. That's how I began. I mean, I knew about your work, but this is how I feel like we're in the same sisterhood, trying to advance issues of the global South. So what is the connection for you between the DISE Collective? What does it mean for you and the work that you do right now in academia?
The DISE Collective has been just a wonderful group of really dynamic women who do research that's similar. We all have an emphasis on race and empowerment and social justice and doing that in our research and just in our community service as well. So I've been working with that organization and with you and so many other really wonderful women. Dr. Caroline Shanaz Hossain of the University of Toronto is the person who primarily is the founder of the group. And so we just sort of support each other. We are now expanding to do a lot to make sure that we get that women scholars, especially women of color, get the kind of support that they need in terms of the fairness that they need, making sure that if someone cites their work, that we're mentioned, because that's been a big problem in the discipline over the years, is the problem that people will cite your work and will refer to it, but yet they won't list Black women scholars. And those citations are very important for scholars when they go up for promotion. So that's just one of the things that we do. We go to conferences, we collaborate on grants, we collaborate on books, and it's just really a wonderful, just dynamic group of people to work with.
And that's, for me, has been a sisterhood also, friends are learning from each other and reading our work and just getting ideas of what is it that, how we can support each other, elevating the issue of indigenous people in this country, African Americans, and the connections between our experiences in this country. So I encourage everyone to read Beyond Racial Capitalism, and not just because I have a chapter in it, but because I think it's a wonderful collection of the African American experience, the Afro-Caribbean experience, and the indigenous experience surviving the exploitation of capitalism in this country. So what do you most like about this book that you would like to elevate and encourage people to read about it?
I like a lot of things about the book. The main thing that I like about it is that it's an academic book, but it's a book that everyone can read. You don't have to be a student or a teacher or educator to understand. I think it's a book that's really useful for activists. It's useful for women and men, for just people, just regardless of what your background is. It's useful for people of color, but just regardless of what your race and ethnicity is, you can learn a lot about the ways that women work together to empower themselves, empower their families, to take leadership positions in their communities, all of the things even that you promote in your work, your podcast, just the way that women are activists, because in the countries that we look at, it's a very interdisciplinary book in the sense that we look at American cities, but also cities in other parts of the world as well. And we look at the way that women are victims of discrimination, economically, politically, and otherwise. And many of these women are from poor communities, but they all come together and they work together in their communities to pool their money together. It is called the social economy. When people have social relationships, they establish trusting relationships with each other, they pool their money together. And as a result of that, in some cases, these are women that can't just walk into a bank and get a loan. So they work with other women in their communities and they contribute money to a fund. And every month, one woman gets whatever money they've accumulated. And that's something that's been going on for many, many years. It's something that we're less familiar with in America. But I think that's what the major focus of the book is that you learn about the things that women do to empower themselves. Because really, when I use the word victim, I shouldn't have said even the word victim. They're the targets of discrimination. But these women refuse to allow themselves to be victimized because they work together for the economic standing, but also as a form of political protest as well.
Yeah, and that's what's important, I think, about what we're trying to do in the book is to not just talk about discrimination and systemic way that women and women of color are excluded, but how they come together to thrive, right? How they use the social economy to survive and thrive and create opportunity for future generations. So that's what when I was approached by Dr. Caroline Chenaz to do this book and include the chapter on indigenous Mexican women in the United States, that's what I liked about the approach to the book, that we were talking about their experience and their cultural heritage of thriving and surviving as a collective.
Right.
Yeah. And you also write a lot. You are a scholar on the experience of Black women in the political sphere, and that's also. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because there is being a lot said about how Black women, are the bastion of the Democratic Party politics, but also of the experience of African Americans in this country. So can you talk a little bit about that and your focus on studying and advancing the writings and teachings on the experience of the African American community and the politicization?
Right. I've been doing research on African American communities for years, since I was in grad school, I guess, basically, and since I became a professor 30 years ago. But now in recent years, I focus solely more so on Black women, because as you mentioned, Black women are like the backbone of the Democratic Party. Black women are more active politically in Black communities than Black men are. And Black women just generally now are running for offices, are winning offices. I have another book coming out any day now, entitled Political Black Girl Magic, the Elections and Governance of Black Female Mayors. And it talks about Black women who run for and won mayor's offices in cities in America. And so I was encouraged to write about Black women because of my own experiences in life, just as a Black woman, but also as a scholar over the years. When I was in graduate school, I was never able to learn about Black women in any capacity. There were no Black studies courses, you were discouraged from doing research on Black politics. Early in my career as a young professor, I was also discouraged from doing research on Black politics. It's unheard of to do research on Black women. And I had never heard of Black women scholars like Jewel Prestige, Diane Penderhughes, or Sheila Harmon Martin. I'd never heard of women who were doing this type of work. And so that kind of encouraged me in later years as a senior scholar who had tenure, who had fought tenure battles, who won tenure battles, to be able to do the kind of research that I wanted to do and to encourage other young women to do the same, to not think as I was taught earlier in my career, that you should be ashamed of doing research on Black people or ashamed of doing research on Black women because Black women aren't contributing anything. And now, especially when you look at the successes of women like Kamala Harris, who's vice president, and Black women in Congress, Black women running, none have been elected as governor, but it's just a matter of time before one will. So that has encouraged me as well, just seeing these victories of Black women and just being able to mentor and empower other young scholars and teach them about the experiences of Black women.
This is why I believe that the DISE Collective, which brings Black academics together to explore our experience as women of color in academia, capturing the experience of our communities is so important. It is very sometimes detrimental to our careers in academia to focus on that study because we're still battling the white European idea of what academia should be. How have you been able to survive that process yourself before DISE? How do you were able to create your own network of women in academia to support and inspire your work and be successful in a process of going for tenure? Because that is very difficult for a lot of us in academia.
Yeah, I think a lot of younger scholars just don't really understand that people and the things that people in my generation and your generation that we had to overcome as far as going up for tenure. I remember I was teaching at, I won't say the name of the school, but it was a major research university. And I went up for tenure. There was only one woman who'd ever gotten tenure before me at that university. And I remember when I went into a meeting when they were trying to deny me tenure, I eventually got it. But I went into a meeting and she was in a room and there were just white men and her. Everyone in the room was white, and she was the only woman. And then I was there trying to defend my work on Black politics that I had been hired to do, and hearing people say that, oh, well, this isn't legitimate research, and having people discount it, even though I had a real strong record of publishing, teaching, and service. So I was able to survive simply because of the friendships that I've made. That's why those academic conferences and those community organizations are so important, because you meet people that can really give you a lot of help. And also I have a very strong family. I grew up in a really good community in the city of Memphis, and I kept in touch with a lot of my friends that I've known since elementary school. So it's important to have those friendships if you're involved in any type of activism, whether it be a scholarly activism or any other kind. Because, I mean, even when you work hard and you're qualified for something, you're always going to have people who are going to try to stop you from getting somewhere, or who are going to try to discriminate against you. And it really does affect your mental health. You may think that you're strong and that, oh, it's not that bad, but it does affect your mental health. So you do need to have some type of family support system or community support system in place.
That is so important because it does take an emotional toll when you are trying to produce your writing or think of new ideas, teach, and sometimes support students who are also first generation
Oh, yeah.
students in our universities who have their own um, issues to trying to survive. And so we become their main women of color or professors of color become their support system in higher ed. So it's important to find that networking and pay attention to your own mental health. And also, there is this battle when you're trying to advance in academia, balancing your own commitment to social justice as a scholar activist and surviving the pressures of standing up for what you believe in, and passing that knowledge into the younger generation, and also try to advance your own career. So that balance is very stressful. But you have been able to do that, and you right now are at the center of this battle that we're seeing in Florida against higher education and trying to basically control what is taught on schools. And you were you were part of a group of scholars who actually testify against the governor of Florida on a anti-border discrimination lawsuit. How is that going, and what is your position, or what are you doing as a scholar and just as a citizen of Florida to counteract this leaning towards the conservative side or totalitarianism that we are leaning towards in not just in Florida, but in this country?
Yeah, I've been very involved in it, and I think that's why it's so important for there to be senior faculty. Like, I'm a full professor with tenure, and as a result of that, I'm able to get involved in lawsuits and various things that other people who are untenured aren't able to. So we have really been fighting the good fight here in Florida. John Lewis, the late congressman and civil rights icon, is someone that I greatly admire. And he had a phrase about getting in good trouble. And
Yes.
sometimes it's important for, even when you're risking things, I don't think anybody likes to be thought of as a troublemaker, but you do have to have that scholar activism in you, especially I think when you're a Black scholar, and especially like me, a Black woman from the South. So here in Florida, for people who may not be as familiar, we've been dealing with a lot from K through 12 and the banning of books, the denial of a right to have an optional advanced placement African American history course for high school students was denied. And now the target is with universities, a target with unions, are trying to get rid of the unions, make it harder for people to pay their dues. And there are a lot of other things that are going on here that are just really just ruthless. And so I was involved in a lawsuit with two of my colleagues that has been very successful. Thank goodness we were able to sell it. And they had told us that we could not testify in a voting rights case because a case had been filed alleging voting discrimination, and the university denied us of the right to participate. But we did it anyway, which meant we even could possibly have been reprimanded or even fired. But it was a matter of principle for me. So we did it anyway. We ended up having to sue our university. And in the end, they changed the policy that didn't allow us to participate. And we were able to get a victory. And I've also been an expert witness in other voting discrimination cases as well, different types of tactics that are being used to try to basically stop people of color, especially African Americans and Latinos, from voting. So I'm involved in a lot of that as well. So I think that activism for me is very important. And I know I've had people say to me that they would have liked to have gotten involved, but they were afraid. But I don't live my life in fear. I believe in principle, and I believe in doing what's best for the community. And so that's why I get involved in lawsuits, because sometimes, as John Lewis said, you have to be involved in that good trouble. You have to be able to look yourself in the mirror every day and like the person that you see.
And that's such an inspirational way to say it, that we cannot live our life in fear, and that we have to fight for the America and for the dignity of our lives and the dignity of our people, and the beliefs in this country as a democracy. I feel that that a lot, that it's not a it's always being in constant struggle, right, to actually realize what that the democratic values ought to be for all of us, not just some of us. So, in higher education, as overall plays a role in teaching what citizenship means for people, right, and what it ought to be. So, what do you tell your students when they see this shift in education to the government trying to regulate how you learn history? What part of history do you learn, and why should they stand with? What should they learn from this period, and why should they get involved in defending access to knowledge? Because that's, I think, at this moment, that's what we're trying to defend.
Right. And the one thing I've been very impressed by here in Florida, throughout the state, not just in Gainesville, but everywhere, the students have been very much involved in everything that's been going on. I got a chance recently to visit the New College of Florida in Sarasota, and their students have been through a lot. It was once a progressive liberal arts college, but now there's an attempt to turn it into sort of like a conservative think tank type of school. The students have been protesting that. So I always tell students that, you don't want students to get in trouble. You're not telling them to get themselves kicked out of school, but I am happy about the fact that there are different organizations that students are able to join and work together in. They're very much aware of what's going on. I talk to a lot of students a lot to keep them abreast of what's going on. I have a group of students that I'm working with as their mentor, and we're doing research together, but they also are very much involved in what's going on with the different laws that are being passed here. So I would say to them that you have to fight for your education. You have to fight for academic freedom. And there should not be a thought police on campus that tells students that they can and can't learn certain things. And I think that's what's happening here. It's not even a case in which they say it's to avoid indoctrination, but that's not true, because we don't have the power to indoctrinate students, even if we wanted to. These students are too smart for us to be able to tell them how to think. And the classes that they're now trying to ban and get rid of, and even professors probably like me that they're probably trying to intimidate, are those classes are optional. You don't have to take them; they're electives, and so that's another reason why they shouldn't be gotten rid of. The attack on diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. There's not enough diversity. There's very
Yeah.
little on these
Yes.
campuses. And
Yes.
now they're trying to get rid of the few programs that exist to try to diversify campuses. So students should be made aware and keep awareness of what's going on and work together in their different organizations to decide how they're going to attack this, because it definitely is something that they need to take the lead on trying to question.
We just finished discussing how it is important to engage students in the contention of their ability to study what they want. Personal choice is about, I want to study. Give me the personal choice to seek the knowledge that I want. And I think that that's what we're seeing in college campus, is this idea that government now is going to tell us what we should be studying. So how will you, there is this ongoing attack against the whole idea of critical race theory and examining the impact of racism and race and slavery in the American context. So most of my listeners are young people. And how would you describe CRT and critical race theory to them? And why is it important to understand what it is and for
Mhm.
them to defend a right to uh, to understand the real American history, which is
Mhm.
that's what it's all about.
Well, critical race theory started as a theory called critical legal studies, and it started out at American law schools, and later it became critical race theory. The person probably who's best known for it is Harvard professor Derek Bell, and he's done number of writings, and based on his research about African American history, and to some extent even about the way things still are, America was founded on racism, and America was founded on discrimination. And what critical race theory says is that whites over time have benefited from the racism and discrimination that has existed against Black people, against other people as well, but especially against Black people. And so it's used as a framework to study certain problems in American society. And even when you think about a landmark book like Michelle Alexander wrote a book entitled The New Jim Crow, a lot of books use like the critical race theory framework as a way to study race and race relations in America. And even some research has used it as a framework for studying things like health outcomes. When you think about the fact that African Americans, especially poor African Americans, are more affected by certain health problems than other groups, and even people who are Black who aren't poor sometimes are more affected by things like hypertension, heart disease, diabetes, and other issues. And I'm finding, and I don't know if this has really been proven, but even with autism, my 18-year-old son is severely autistic, and I noticed that even over the years when I've gone to his classes, it has been a significant number of Black children who have autism and who have severe forms of autism, especially Black boys. So critical race theory questions, is that because of race? It's not designed to try to say that anybody should feel guilty about race, but it's just looking at certain problems, like even if, especially with prison rates and that type of thing, the disproportionate numbers of men of color and women of color who are in American prisons. Is that because of the legacy of racism? Is the question that it would ask if you're using the critical race theory framework. So really, it's a really good framework. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of people are purposely misinterpreting what it means. A lot of people don't know what it means, but they're just saying that, oh, it's just designed to make, white people feel guilty. That's not true. It's designed to look at the past and whether the past continues to affect the present. And that's why I think it's a very important framework that we need to study, and that we do need to teach more students about it.
Yeah, and I think that what is important to remind everyone is in the process of education and knowledge is to understand why things are happening. And to me, that critical race theory is about understanding why certain things are set in place. And I often tell my students, it is not it might not be your fault that these things are still happening today, but it's your responsibility to do something about it.
Right.
And that's what a theoretical framework is all about, is understanding why things happen and then how as a society we can fix them. So I'm totally in support of that. And then making the connections between, what's happening with the don't say gay bills, what's happening with the demonization of immigrants now also
Mhm.
in Florida, right?
Right. Right.
And so that people understand that discrimination still exists. against people who are not white or European descent. So we are at the center of that battle in Florida. I mean, I think in America, but in Florida, I think because Governor DeSantis is trying to run for president and make himself better in their eyes than Donald Trump as a candidate. I think that what happens in Florida is going to determine how these issues are treated around the country. So what keeps you hopeful that people are making the connections and understanding that we really need to stop, we need to really address the radicalization to the right of issues in Florida? But what makes you hopeful that we're doing that?
Well, I'm hopeful because of the young generation, because of the millennials, the Gen Z generation, and the work that I'm seeing them doing, mobilizing in different campus organizations, community organizations that are very involved in putting networks throughout the state. There are different chapters of different groups. Even some of the more established civil rights groups are working in communities. They're having something next month for the entire month of June, but especially during Juneteenth. They're having a bus tour that's traveling throughout the state of Florida to register people to vote, to educate people about what's going on here in terms of voting rights, in terms of educational rights, in terms of racism, discrimination on the basis of race, ethnicity, sexual orientation. Then also there's been an attack on reproductive rights here as well, a ban on abortions after 6 weeks. And so those are the types of things that these organizations are doing. And one thing that really motivates me is, as a scholar of civil rights and politics, who has studied the civil rights movement and the height of the movement in the 1960s and 70s, young people really took a major role in those organizations. And now I'm seeing the same thing. Young people are very much involved in various communities, and not just college students, but even like high school students and younger, who are very concerned about different types of issues. Gun violence, of course, is a big issue across the nation, and especially Florida. We had a shooting in Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, and a lot of students were motivated to get involved in the battle against that. And that led to them getting involved in other types of battles as well. And I'm noticing even at a very young age, kids are very enlightened. And that's why it's so troubling to think about them not being able to read certain books, because even like my daughter's 17, and even when she was little, she was always involved. A lot of it's because she's my daughter, but she was always involved in a lot of things. And her friends as well were very aware of a lot of political issues, economic issues. A lot of students in most states have to do community service work in order to get certain scholarships, and it gives them sort of a consciousness of things that are going on in their communities. So I'm encouraged, despite all the bad news that we hear about Florida, but first of all, the fact that there are people who aren't afraid to file lawsuits and fight this. And the lawsuits have been successful. We haven't always gotten everything we wanted, but especially the ones with the voting rights, the ones that I've been involved with have all won at the lower levels. And when it gets to the appellate court, sometimes they overturn some things, but we've been successful in finding brave people to fight things in court. And then people in community organizations are very involved. People are mobilizing, getting ready for the upcoming presidential election to make sure that they vote and register everyone in their communities to vote. So I'm encouraged by those things.
Excellent. And I think that the example that you're setting by being part of those people who file lawsuits to try to stop that, it is encouraging as well that you're using your position and your privilege as a tenure professor to actually say, listen, this is not acceptable, we're going to stand for it. So that's you're also setting the example for all of us and for your younger generation that there is a way to fight back and protect our democracy. So I want to thank you for that and for inspire those coming behind to actually take principled positions and that defend the dignity of humanity and human beings and all of us. So thank you for that courage and for the inspiration that you provide to the younger generation. So what are you working on right now that you wanna share with my listeners?
Well, right now I'm on sabbatical this upcoming year. So luckily I'm going to be involved in promoting our book and then my other book. But also I'm working on, because there's academic freedom is such a big political topic, and I've been so involved in it during the year that I'm on sabbatical during this upcoming year, and I don't have to teach. I'm going to write a book about academic freedom and what's happening in Florida and other states as well. So that's kind of where I am right now, just really focusing on the book, continuing to fight the activism, continue to working in communities to try to register people to vote, to mobilize people, to educate people about different things, continue to work with my students, doing the work that I love to do.
I will work with my colleagues to invite you to Cornell University to talk about academic freedom, because that's an issue that we have very strong activism on our campus. So
Oh, great.
we're happy to invite you and joining us there. So we'll follow up with that.
Yeah.
But how can people stay in touch with you and all the work that you're doing?
Well, you can follow me on Facebook. You can follow me on Twitter. You could also look at my website, which is you can do just a Google search of my name, and it'll come up with my website. Probably the best way to contact me is probably through Twitter. And I also want to, before I forget, just thank you for this podcast and for all the things that you do and the scholarships that you've done and the role that you've played as a scholar activist role model as well. So I want to make sure I thank you. But I'm easy to find if you just type Sharon Austin in a search engine. My Twitter handle, my Facebook handle, and I'd be more than happy to people can also contact me by email.
Awesome. Thank you. We will list your contact information and how people can find you on our website and on this podcast. And I just want to invite everybody to stay connected with you, because you're at the forefront of stopping, this excess of authoritarianism that is happening in Florida. And we want to support you, and we want to support all the activists who are trying to turn this around and stop it in Florida, but stop it from spreading, because we need to protect our democracy, and you are at the forefront of that battle. So thank you for coming to share your story and hopefully inspire my listeners and just anyone who cares about our democracy to stay engaged. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
You heard it. It's all about taking action, standing from a place of principle, defending what you believe in, and fighting for our democracy, and fighting for the dignity of all human beings. Take action. Join our Activista Rise Up newsletter, and join the activists that come here and share their struggles for change. I am Dr. Patricia Campos-Medina, and this is Activista Rise Up.